All right, we are recording now. Counting us down. 3, 2.
You're listening to Missing Out with Lex Michael and Tari J. Let's start the show.
Hello there, Misketeers. Welcome back to Missing Out. I'm Tari J.
I am Lex Michael.
And if this is your first time listening, what we do here is we introduce each other to different media, whether it be movies, music, television, spoken word, books, experiences, things that have built us up as people, and we hope that in sharing it, it builds you up. We are the retrospective that is introspective.
Misketeers, this mamushka is for you.
Oh yeah, mamushka, 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 mamushka.
I'm just going to say right up top that the mamushka was one of many things from the movie we're discussing today that I had no memory of. And let me tell you, it was just one delightful discovery after another.
Yes, the Addams Family, which was released in 1991, the debut film of director Berry Sonnenfeld, whom you might know from the Men in Black films, or other stuff. Those things don't count because the only thing that matters are the Men in Black films. But it has a star-studded cast. It has Raul Julia, Angelica Houston, Christopher Lloyd, Christina Ricci, Jimmy Workman. Baby, this is all there. I haven't even started pitching yet, and I'm just trying to sell it immediately.
It's also got Carol Stroiken as Lurch, who I completely forgot was Lurch in this movie. But Carol Stroiken, outside of his role as Lurch, probably best known, and certainly best known to me, as the Giant, a.k.a. the Fireman from Twin Peaks.
Oh, okay, cool. So I'm going to pitch this thing, and then we're going to talk about your reintroduction to this movie. Okay?
Let's do a pitch this. I saw it and I'm still unsold. I'm still feeling trepidatious. Tip me over. I'm on the fence. Tip me over into this other person's yard where I love the Addams Family and I'm buying it. I'm giving all my money.
All right. Well, poke, 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 poke. I just poked you and you fell over to the other side of the fence. No.
Surprisingly effective.
Yeah. I will say, so if I were to try to pitch this to someone who had never seen it and was like, why would I watch something from the 90s and it's a remake? Oh boy, I hate remakes. Technically, it's not a remake. It's the first feature film in the Addams Family brand. Originally, they were comics, and then they were series in 1964, and then we find this feature film with the best casted characters. It has amazing sight gags. It has a wonderful score, and also, furthermore, etc. The story is very fun, and I think it holds up even now, over 20 years later, or I guess about 20 years later, because that's how math works. So I highly recommend it. I think if you go back, you'll find yourself delighted, and you'll find that this is one of the best adaptations that is both faithful and loving of a previous property. And that's my pitch. Lex Michael, when did you first see this?
Well, so interestingly enough, okay, I was so sure that I had seen this movie when I was younger, long enough ago that I knew I didn't remember much of it at all. But I was so sure that this was just going to be a fun trip down memory lane for me, very nostalgic experience, getting to revisit an artifact from my youth. And as I watched this movie, I got to, I want to say, maybe the half-hour mark to 40-minute mark before it dawned on me, I don't think I'd ever seen this. I had seen parts of Addams Family Values, and I believe that I saw Addams Family Reunion, which was the sequel that Sonnenfeld didn't do. It had a new cast. I think Tim Curry was Gomez in that one. And then I had seen a bunch of I think it was called The New Addams Family, which was a series that ran, I think, before it was ABC Family, the network was Fox Family. And I think right after it launched, they ran a sort of rebooted Addams Family series. And I saw a bunch of that. So it was very much a presence in my household when I was younger. And it was very much something that was part of my consciousness. Like I knew who all the characters were. I knew what their relationships to each other were. But I don't believe I had ever seen this movie before. So when you asked me, when did I first see this movie? And my answer is, I think yesterday is the first
Nice.
time that I saw this movie. And yeah, there's a lot to, when we get into spoilers, we'll talk about some of the plot stuff that I definitely had no memory of whatsoever. But I want to ask, because this was your pick, what is your relationship with the Addams Family, both this movie in particular and also the bigger franchise overall?
So, just before I talk about that, to address your never having seen it, I call that the RoboCop effect. If you guys will remember, I thought I had seen RoboCop 1, but I had not. I had only seen RoboCop 2. So I understand your feelings. For me, the Addams Family, I have very old, fond memories of it in that, like, it was a show that I believe that we had seen at the drive-in in San Jose. I really liked the family dynamics. Gomez was probably my archetype for cool characters because he's just so whimsical and he's just such a big character. And Morticia Addams was also like not a sexual awakening, but like I really found her to be very attractive. And so I also was a fan of the animated Addams Family series, which also led me into Addams Family Values, which people don't give enough credit to. It was a very fun movie. Like, it wasn't the same as the first movie, but like it had its own charm.
Yeah, all I really remember from Addams Family Values now is they try to send Wednesday and Pugsley to summer camp, I think,
Uh-huh.
something like that. And in typical Addams fashion, it all goes tremendously awry.
I think because it allows the characters to get out of the house, I think it has another special place in my heart. Like, there's a section in this movie where they try to do like the Addams Family in normal society, and you're like, all right, I see what you're doing, but like it didn't land as much. And then the second one, they were like, all right, you see what I did here? I'm gonna do that, but bigger and better. And so that was the like appeal of that, everything that happens in the summer camp, which is amazing. And I believe that them going to summer camp was also, specifically Pugsley and Wednesday going to summer camp, was also a thing that was featured in the original like comics by Addams. So I think it was a nice little nod to that as well.
It's also wild that this entire concept sprang up from, because I want to say, didn't Addams start these cartoons in like the 1930s, I want to say?
Probably
Or
something like that.
Oh, here we go. Yep, 1938. And they were one panel New Yorker cartoons, which is sort of wild. So now, when I read through the New Yorker and I look at all these cartoons that are so highbrow that literally nobody understands them, I'm going to now be looking for which ones I think would make the most lucrative IP. And then I will be reaching out to the artists and asking them if I can make money off of their work.
I mean, that's kind of how it works out these days. You're like, yeah, baby, time to make my family circus cinematic universe. Yeah. My Calvin and Hobbes, dark, gritty, I don't know, Amazon series. Oh boy, it's the boys, but with Calvin and Hobbes.
Who can we? I know they crossed over like in animation. I want to say. I know they crossed over with Scooby Doo, right? So you could do, since it seems like they just put out the animated Scooby Doo, the one that's just called Scoob, and maybe that'll light the world on fire on VOD. It'll make a ton of money, and they'll just want to do those. But if not, I say cross it over with Addams Family. Shit, they're doing animated Addams Family stuff now, so cross them over. Throw Calvin and Hobbes in there, but like make it like hard R. Do the Snyder cut of the Addams Family Scooby Doo Calvin and Hobbes animated crossover. Snyder cut's timely again. You're
gonna get people all right. Oh man. So can you believe this was only made for $30 million? That's
$30
cool.
million, but didn't they go something like $5 million over budget because they kept changing things?
Yes. So the original budget was $25 million, but it cost $30 million. Because like the set and to build the house on the original place where the original series did their house was like $100,000. So it was a big budget, but I mean, they made that back in spades. I believe that the box office was $191 million. So I mean, even though the studio that was producing the film went under, they made a lot of money.
That's right. Yeah, it was Orion, and I think Orion came back a couple of years ago finally. But yeah, nobody really wanted this movie. It seems like nobody really had a huge amount of faith that it was gonna be a hit. And I think Orion had just put out, I think Silence of the Lambs and Dances with Wolves, which were big hits, but they also produced a bunch of movies that really did not at all make them their money back, and it ate through a ton of their money. Right. So I believe they co-financed, or they sold it. I think they sold it to Paramount because they just assumed this was not going to make them any money at all, which, as it turns out, was not the best idea because it made a lot of money.
Yeah. It's like when Paramount gave partial rights of the Hulk to Marvel Studios, and they were like, we can't make a good Hulk movie. And they were like, guess what, mother effers? We're going to feature him, and all of the movies he's featured in are going to make billions with a B. And that made Paramount pee their pants. Yeah. Okay.
Good. Some good pee stuff. I
Thank
like
you.
it. I like we worked some pee material in before spoilers.
I mean, that's my jam. You know what I'm saying? If there's anything, I'm like the royal court in The Princess and the Pea, in that I will find places to put peas into, and you gotta find it. You gotta feel it out. No, is that not?
I don't like it.
Okay. Well, whatever. Someone will. But I think we've gone as far as we can without really going into spoilers, because the main plot thread of this whole thing is integral from beginning to end, and there's a lot of stuff that happens. So we will come back after a short ad, and then we will talk about all the spoilers, all the fun stuff, the 90s stuff, the characters, the karamia, all of it. After we drop the spoiler wall. Before that, just a reminder that if you would like to support the show and you would like to show us some love, you can go onto iTunes and leave us a rating or review. That really helps people find us, really helps us get to the top of the charts, and spread the word about how great this show is and how much you love us. So please do so if you feel so inclined. We read 5 stars here on this show. So we will be back right after this ad. See you soon.
Bro, we did it. We hacked into the Libsyn mainframe.
Oh shit, really?
Yeah, now we can finally force other podcasts to play our ads. Hit the button.
All right, here we go.
Do you fancy bonus?
How about jizz?
Or perhaps bestiality piques your interest?
You can find all that filth and more on Fartmouth Podcast, recorded in the basement of Fartmouth University.
Fartmouth is one of the most offensive comedy podcasts on the internet. We do weekly segments, games, song parodies, and more.
You can find Fart Myth on Apple, Google, Spotify, or anywhere else podcasts are played.
All right, we are back. That spoiler wall is down, baby. Okay, so Lex Michael, you know what time it is. It's time to
Bust a recap.
So what do you got for us?
Do you have a permit for that little pew pew weapon you always fire off at breakdown time?
Yes, I have a permit for it. I also went through a background check. When I'm not doing the show, I keep it in a gun safe, and I keep my bullets separate from it because I don't believe that guns are really useful for self-defense in that they do more harm than anything. So it's mostly a show gun for like the range and things of that sort.
Yeah. I feel like the most optimal use for a firearm is like starting races and things.
Right. So there you
speaking of starting races, that's the segue we're going with today. Pew pew. I do not have a permit for this pew pew gun. So let's see. What is this movie about? This will be interesting. Having just come away from my first experience with it, can I rattle off from memory the general plot of this thing? Let us find out. So. Our central protagonist, arguably, is Gomez Addams, as portrayed by Raul Julia. And something like 25 years ago, his beloved brother, Fester, went missing, presumably never to be seen or heard from again. Now, cut to the present. And it turns out that Gomez's lawyer, with whom he occasionally swashbuckles, is in debt up to his eyeballs to a loan shark and develops a scheme. And the scheme involves the loan shark's adopted son, whose name I want to say is Gordon, who the lawyer pieces together has this uncanny resemblance to Gomez's long-lost brother. So he says, here's what we can do so that I can repay my debt to you, and you can probably get a little sweet extra payout on top of it. We will have Gordon pose as the long-lost Fester Addams. And when he is embraced by the family, he will sneak around the house. He will find the sort of secret vault full of all of the Addams riches, and he will abscond with that money, and he will return to them, and they will live with a ton of money forever, and everybody will be very happy. He'll be out of debt. He won't have to swashbuckle with Gomez Addams anymore. Shit, he could probably retire happily and sip little umbrella drinks and stuff forever. So they perpetuate this story that Fester was lost in the Bermuda Triangle for the past 25 years, and he's lost his memories. And of course, Gomez is very saddened by the fact that Fester has these gaps in his knowledge of their childhood together, because he was truly a very beloved brother. But as Gomez discusses the past with faux Fester, as they reminisce together, Gomez starts to think that maybe this Fester isn't who he claims to be. He says maybe this is an imposter. Now, Fester's adopted loan shark mother poses as a doctor, like a psychiatrist, and convinces Gomez, A, that the reason Fester can't remember things is because the Bermuda Triangle gave him amnesia, but B, the reason Gomez suspects Fester of wrongdoing, of impropriety, is displacement. It's all on Gomez, and Gomez has to work to break down his displacement and fully embrace Fester. So Gordon, as Fester, starts to grow close to the family. He helps Wednesday and Pugsley, the children, prep for their school play. And now Gomez wants to throw a giant party in honor of his brother Fester. And they throw a party where they dance this sort of ritualistic dance of brotherly love called the Mamushka, which is, of course, now, it must be stated, probably the greatest musical sequence ever committed to film. And Gomez is more inclined now than he was before to embrace his brother. Now, while this is going on, the lawyer figures out that big finger quotes, Fester, as the older brother, is actually sort of heir to the entire estate. He actually has greater control over the family home, at least on paper, than Gomez does. And so effectively, the law teams up against them, and they are sort of ushered out of their own home. Now, Gomez, very despondent, having been duped, the family sort of cast adrift, and they are left to their own devices. They have to figure out how to work. So, Morticia tries to teach preschool, for example. Thing, the little disembodied hand, goes to work in a mailroom. But they figure out, or rather, Thing figures out what the scheme is when Morticia is abducted, because they want to sort of torture Morticia so that Morticia will let them know where all of the secret money is. So the Thing communicates this finally to Gomez. So Gomez and the family rush to Morticia's rescue, and Gordon finally decides for himself that he would sort of rather be an Addams than the son of this loan shark trying to turn him against what might in fact be his newfound family. Pulls out a magical book, and out of the book comes this crazy storm that shoots the mother and the lawyer out the window and into these fresh graves with coffins that the children have prepared. And then lightning strikes Gordon Fester's brain, which apparently restores his memories, as he has, in fact, been the real Fester all along, which is definitely the movie that they were making when they started making this movie. And I will not hear anything to the contrary. The Addams clan, now happily reunited in the family home, plays a rousing round of Wake the Dead. And Morticia reveals to an overjoyed Gomez that she is pregnant, and there will be another little Addams running around, finding really discreet and whimsical ways to murder people and get away with it and stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, also, Cousin It shows up at one point, and it rules, because Cousin It is the greatest Addams Family character, in my opinion. I got to like the hour mark of this movie going, you know what, this is super fun. But there's no Cousin It. And like, it'd be a huge bummer if they were maybe saving Cousin It for the sequel or something. But not only did they not save Cousin It for the sequel, not only do they know to give the people what they want, but Cousin It shows up to this big party blasting MC Hammer, which rules. Also, a lot more MC Hammer content than I was expecting from the Addams Family picture.
MC Hammer was hot back then, baby. He was the symbol of prestige. You got MC Hammer in your film, you gonna go gold, or you're gonna get a Golden Globe. You're gonna win an Emmy, and a Tony, and Oscar. That's how you know it.
The famous Ito.
Yes. What? No. No.
You said Emmy, Tony, Oscar, Ito.
I also said a Golden Globe.
Oh, Emmy,
Yeah.
Eggto. There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Eggto, with the with both G's from Golden
Right, of
Globe.
course.
Eggto.
Yes, got it. So that was thank you for recapping that for us.
I feel like I kind of nailed it. I mean, I feel like you got to juice it up a little extra whimsy. But like, if I were trying to act out, for example, the fencing scenes or like the Mamushka sequence, no one would see me. And
Right.
so I feel like no matter what, it's going to fall a little bit short of capturing the experience of watching the movie. But I try to do my best.
Yeah. I mean, speaking of the idea of capturing the essence of something, this movie, many people think was a Tim Burton film, which it was not. It was originally they wanted Tim Burton to be the director, and he refused. Not refused. I guess he passed. Which I find that I think that Berry Sonnenfeld, this being his first foray as a director, like he had been doing like DP work beforehand, so he it wasn't like he stepped off a bus and they were like, you direct this film. But this is his first time like taking the helm, and he also ultimately ended up doing the DP for this because both of his DPs ended up in the hospital somehow. He was under the impression that this film was cursed because so many crazy bad things happened in the midst, and like I don't remember whom it was, but it is said that like one of the executives was so upset that he ended up doing it that like the name on his director's chair would change to different directors every day, and none of them were his own. I don't know if that's true, but that is what was said.
Interesting. Yeah, this was sort of it sounds like not a troubled production the way you hear about a lot of movies having troubled productions, but yeah, it does seem like there were a number of obstacles that popped up while they were trying to shoot this thing. And I know like at one point they had to delay production because like Raul Julia had a blood vessel in his eye that burst, so they couldn't shoot him. So they had to film around him while he was recovering. I want to say Berry Sonnenfeld's wife became ill in some fashion, which sort of pulled his focus away from it. But yeah, him having to, the cinematographers on the Addams Family is sort of like Spinal Tap drummers, where they keep switching them out, and terrible fates continue to befall them.
Right.
But as it happens, like I believe you mentioned this a minute ago, Sonnenfeld himself was a cinematographer. I mean, he sort of came up in movies with the Coen brothers. Like he shot Blood Simple, he shot Raising Arizona, he shot Miller's Crossing for them. He worked on Misery, When Harry Met Sally. So it helps a lot if you're in a situation where you just keep losing DPs to be able to step up and do it yourself. But I would imagine that Barry was very tired at the end of this shoot.
Oh yeah. And I think that, like, considering all of that, the fact that he was able to not just like replicate what a Tim Burton movie would be or feel like, but like he was able to put his own spin on it and really make it his own, which I thought was a really cool thing for him to do. Like I liked a lot of the aesthetics of this movie. I liked how a lot of like the sight gags that they were able to integrate. I liked a lot of just the off kilter like interactions between the family and the people in the real world. And also just like, I think one of the main things that I really enjoyed about the movie were a lot of the Gomez, Morticia tableaus that they really managed to put together. Like there's a moment when it's basically fake Fester is screaming because he is surprised by Thing, and they cut to Gomez lounging in his bed and Morticia lovingly laying upon his chest, and them, you know, reminiscing about the good old days of Fester screaming in the night. And I thought that just that moment, the way it's framed, the way it's lit, the way that they maintained Angelica Houston's eye spotlight, I thought all of that was done really well, and you can tell that there's a lot of care put into every frame of this movie.
Yes, this thing is real well directed, and it makes a ton of sense that you might look to Tim Burton to do this. Tim Burton, when they were making this movie, would have just been coming off of Batman. Batman would have just come out in '89, and presumably the big reason he turned this down was to make Batman Returns, which would come out the following year.
Right.
But talking about, you know, the way, I mean, you bring up Gomez and Morticia. I mean, it cannot be said enough how absolutely phenomenal both Raul Julia and Angelica Houston are in this movie. I mean, the whole cast is fantastic. The other standout, obviously, being Christopher Lloyd. But Angelica Houston, I've seen in countless movies. Christopher Lloyd, I've seen in countless movies. Raul Julia is an actor who I am familiar with. But, you know, I pulled up his filmography and I'm looking at the movies he's made, and I think I'd really only seen him in Panic in Needle Park. I've seen One from the Heart, but a very long time ago, and maybe the Street Fighter movie. And I don't have very strong memories of him in any of those movies because it's been such a long time since I had revisited any of them. So watching him as Gomez was, I mean, I feel like revelatory gets to what I'm trying to say, but I feel like even revelatory doesn't quite say it. I was watching this thing yesterday going, oh, wow, I missed out on one of the great screen performances. I think he is that good.
Yeah.
in this movie.
I mean, he brings such a big energy to this character that I don't think that anyone else, like, even now, he is my definitive Gomez Addams. No offense to the original Gomez Addams, or no offense to Captain Commander Poe, but
Yes, I am
but
though
like,
holding out for the live action Addams Family, where we can get an Oscar Isaac Gomez.
right. But like, he, I think, embodies this character so much. And like, you talk about his performance in Street Fighter, which I think he was also the big standout character of that movie. Like, if anyone quotes something from Street Fighter, it's going to be M. Bison talking to Chun-Li about how, you know, the day that Bison graced his village was the greatest day or the most terrible day, but for him it was a Tuesday. Like that, only he could deliver lines in that fashion. Like, there's a moment in this movie where it's right before they get their house taken away, and he's like, they say a man who represents himself as a fool for a client. I am that fool. And I think that is like such a Raul Julia moment. Like, only he could pull off such a big, crazy line like that. And I think that, like, and you know, everyone who knows of his acting resume knows that he brings that type of energy to everything that he did, and he was such a big, like, Broadway performer. He did so much stage acting that he has no choice but to bring that stage energy to the roles he performed. And it was such a loss when he passed away at such a young age.
Yeah. Yeah. It's and that's why, you know, they couldn't really sustain this series without him, right? Because when they wanted to come back and continue to sort of cash in on the Addams Family brand, well, you don't have your Gomez anymore, and that's how you end up with Tim Curry as Gomez in Addams Family Reunion, which I did see probably on the Disney Channel a bunch, or like when it was Fox Family. And I remember being like, yeah, like, Tim Curry's good. He's always good. But even without having seen that first movie, being like, but this isn't the guy. This is like the guy pretending to be the guy.
Right.
But no, like, he's absolutely phenomenal. It's the physicality of the performance. It's the weird little quirky, small, like teeny tiny choices he's making moment to moment. And he's playing, of course, these are all very big, larger than life, over the top cartoon characters. And yet within that construct, he is making these minute, but like very, very specific and pronounced choices. Also, you mentioned the moment in the movie where he's talking about, they say, a man who represents himself or has a fool as a, you said it, you know what you said. But it reminded me very much of the movie we discussed last week, where somebody who is surprisingly talented at killing people and getting away with it decides to represent herself in the court of law, though for Beverly Sutphin it goes a good deal better than it does in the moment for the Addamses. Speaking of which, a lot of characters in this movie refer to Gomez in particular as a fool, because, you know, mostly because they're so frustrating, these people, that they get very frazzled, and they're so strange that clearly they must be deeply foolish people and stuff.
Right.
But, you know, for somebody who keeps being referred to as foolish, I mean, Gomez, and in fact the entire family, seem very, very adept at killing people and getting away with it. Like, there's that moment where I think it's Pugsley, like, they're sitting at a table, and I think Pugsley comes in with a stop sign from down the street, and Gomez has everybody hush for a second so that everybody can listen to what sounds like a real bad, probably fatal car accident.
Right.
And they all sort of laugh and clap and stuff like that. So this family, and again, this really is sort of a family film in terms of its tone. They're real good at murdering people and getting away with it, and not for nothing. Obviously, when Gomez attempts to represent himself in court, like, obviously, first thing that happens to this family is they lose the house, which is not the desired outcome. But on the list of potential outcomes to a situation where the Addams family has to appear in court, I feel like, oh, well, we lost the house is really not the worst thing that could happen to these folks. You know what I mean? Like, there's probably enough in that house to jail them for several lifetimes, although that would be wild, right? Like, what happens when you integrate the Addamses into prison? Like, do you think that it finally breaks them? Or do you think that, like, if you try to send each of them to a different maximum security facility around the country, they all separate from each other end up taking over the place from the inside, like the Kingpin and shit?
I definitely think that they will enjoy it. I don't think that there's any way that the Addams family doesn't become the not even kingpins. They just like become so enamored with the idea of prison that they just don't want to leave. Like, I like to imagine that they serve out their sentence and they're like, you gotta go. And they're like, but I love it here. There's so much injustice. There's so much terribleness that, like, why would I leave? If anything, this is going to be my summer home. I mean, it could be.
And they come back every year.
Yeah. Like, it could be a really interesting way of doing this commentary on how like the prison system and all that stuff, and that like the Addams family in general, as a concept, they are this family who, yes, they have all these like dark interests, and they sometimes will kill people, or like they have this fascination with death and the macabre, but at the core, they are a really tight-knit family with a good amount of mutual respect for one another. They raise their children as co-parents, and they show how proud they are. They support their kids. They're loving to one another as a couple. They allow their living grandparent to live with them. They are well off, like they have money. For all intents and purposes, they are a perfect family. So this idea that people are like, oh man, they're so weird and dumb and crazy because they don't conform to social norms, while at the same time they are everything in terms of mental and interpersonally healthy. So this could be a really good time to like juxtapose those ideas. Oh baby, we are very inclined to pitch sequels, but if we are doing a new sequel on our sweet Amazon Prime platform, it's going to be that one. It's going to be the Oz. It's going to be Oz meets Addams Family.
I mean, like, I would watch that. I feel like we've basically just pitched a successful, like, if this was the early days of HBO, like if this was the time period where Oz sort of went on the air and we went in and pitched that, that show would still be running. I guarantee it.
Ooh, I mean, I think so. But so something else I want to talk about, speaking of like prison and court systems, this movie was really good about using the rule of three. Like the two that really stuck out to me, one was the golf balls. You have it first introduced where Gomez is playing by himself and he smashes a ball into the judge's window and the judge is like, Addams, I hate you. And then you have it brought back as the reminder when he is playing with Gomez, or he's playing with Fester, and they hit it into the judge's house again, and you hear him from off screen. And then it comes full circle where that is used against them to get their house removed, and that the angry judge is then the same judge that, gives the custody to Fester, and he dumps all of the golf balls onto the table, which I thought was a really nice way of paying it off. If anyone's not familiar with the rule of three, it is the idea, the reminder, and the payoff. And so I really like the second use of it when we get the books, where the first instance is, I think it's Gone with the Wind or something like that, where the lawyer opens up the book, there's wind. The next time it is a different book and he opens it up and it's sunlight used on his face. And the last one being the way that we resolve the climax, which is the hurricane book. I really liked that use of the rule of three in this movie. Like, it shows a really adeptness at storytelling.
So, real quick, because obviously, like, I'm familiar with the rule of three, and it is interesting how it became a rule in part because, for whatever reason, I think our brains are sort of wired in such a way where one can be funny. Two, for some reason, not as funny. It feels like you're putting a hat on a hat. Three, though, quite funny indeed. And when you get to four, it's like, all right, you're beating a dead horse. Stop it. Real quick, you said, what are the three things? The what, and the payoff?
It's the idea or the introduction. It is the reminder, and then the payoff.
All right. Well, I'm going to be pretentious as hell and call it the pledge, the turn, and the prestige and shit. But speaking of the prestige, I want to talk about, you referenced in your rule of three, the hurricane book and how we resolve the climax of this movie. And so one of the reasons this thing went over budget is because they were having to shoot a bunch of additional stuff, and there were big revisions taking place while they were making the movie. One of the biggest being that initially the plan was that the Fester Gordon character was going to be an imposter in the end. And this was a plot. I had no memory of the plot of this movie hinging on the idea that Fester might be an imposter. Mm-hmm. But at a certain point, it sounds like the actors sort of got together and talked amongst themselves and went to Sonnenfeld and basically said, this doesn't feel right to us. I think the idea of getting through the end of this story and him actually having been an imposter the entire time would be too much of a downer, tonally incongruous, the wrong kind of dark and bleak for Addams Family. So maybe we sort of pivot and we have it revealed that he was in fact Fester the entire time. And eventually they all decided, I think they sent Christina Ricci as an emissary to plead their case. And I think ultimately it was decided that, okay, we're going to do that. But it definitely, I mean, tell me if you agree or disagree. That element of it definitely feels tacked on to me. That definitely feels like we weren't making this movie an hour ago, and now we're making this movie.
I think that, well, so here's how I feel about it. I'm of two minds in that I think that by my current modern sensibilities, I think that, yes, I think story-wise, it would have been a really interesting turn for him to have been an imposter, yes, but for them to have accepted him into the family as Gomez's brother, and for him to have been like, oh, I found a place that I actually belong, as opposed to trying to be what my mother wanted me to be. I think that would have been a really interesting theme that they could have built to. But I also really like the idea how at the end they're like, oh, it just turns out to have been this thing. And or turns out that he was Fester all along. And they're like, stranger things have happened. I really like the idea of them hand-waving ideas away. Because this movie is so like bonkers that the idea of a contrivance or a convenience like that happening just feels like it exists in this world. Like when they are giving the backstory initially, when Fester is revealed to the family and everyone is like, that seems like unbelievable and crazy. And they're like, that does seem unbelievable and crazy. And they like really embrace it. I guess it really appeals to my, my improv sensibilities, where it's like, all right, we've established this thing, and we're like, hell yeah, that's a thing. I like that idea that the family is willing to just kind of accept whatever happens moving forward.
Yes, I agree. I am sort of taken with the whimsical aspect of that as well. It's just, and maybe if I hadn't, I feel like maybe I knew going in, or I assumed going in, that Fester would actually be Fester, if only because in my head, yeah, Christopher Lloyd plays Fester, and it was never really more layered than that. Maybe if I'd gone in knowing absolutely nothing about this, it would have played more seamlessly to me. But instead, it feels like we have made one choice that our whole plot sort of hinges on. And then at the very end of the movie, no, which I like on paper a lot, because it feels, like you were saying, sort of exactly in line with the sensibilities of these characters in their world. But it just felt a little, as storytelling execution, felt to me a little bit slapdash.
I get that. I'm going to pivot really quick because that gives me a really good chance to talk about the plot element that is the mother character.
Yes.
As everyone knows, this month, and this, I can't believe we've gone this long without saying it, this month is Mother May I. That's our theme for this month, and we thought that it would be a good fit because there is this special relationship between Fester's Gordon and the mother character, who is played by Elizabeth Wilson, who doubles as both Abigail Craven and Dr. Pinder Schloss, which I think I had read somewhere that Pinder means nut and Schloss means house, or her name was Dr. Nuthouse, which I thought was a really cute thing. But like, it is the main factor in which the full scope of the plot hinges on, in that she has this son who looks like Fester, and she has basically been manipulating him throughout his life, and also like even throughout the course of this movie, where she not only gaslights Gomez as the doctor, where you get that displacement argument, and she's like, no, what you're feeling is wrong. Believe other things. Believe what I'm telling you. But you also see it in effect in their relationship. I think the prime example being when Fester finally feels like he's part of the family, and he's been slowly integrating, like playing with the kids and finding that like he digs what they're into. But also when they have the mamushka, and he's like, I've had the best day of my life. Like, I've danced, I've sung, I've kissed girls, like I'm alive, I'm a fully fledged person. And his mom does a real sad guilt trip, and is like, oh, I've just raised you your whole life. Ooh, goo, boo, boo, doo, doo. And he's like, okay, I will set aside my own wants and feelings to make you feel better. And she's like, haha, gaslit you, motherfucker.
It's not completely dissimilar from the relationship between Norman Bates and his mother. Beginning of the month, the first movie we discussed was Hitchcock's Psycho, and the relationship that is suggested between Norman and his mother and explored on the Bates Motel series, which after we talked about Psycho, I started to watch, is very much like the Fester relationship, or the Gordon relationship with his mother, in as much as it's exactly what you were describing. The second she sees that he is experiencing happiness that is separate from her, she feels threatened by it. And so she has to do whatever she can. She has to play on his emotions, on his loyalty to her, whatever it is, to sort of pull him back in, to make sure that he cannot leave the nest the way that would probably be very good for him.
Right. So like, I kind of circling back to your idea of him not being the brother, I think, yes, all of that really factors into this idea that at the end they were going to accept him as their new Fester. And I would have been fine with that, because I think it definitely goes in with the theming. But like, I also think that, Elizabeth Wilson nails it. She kills it. She kills it so good. She does that fake German accent. She also is so mean, and I don't like it. She slaps him at one point, and I was like, don't touch my friend. So, I mean, I think without her, it doesn't sell as well, which I think another good performance is Dan Hedaya, who is the lawyer.
Yes.
I think he does a fantastic job. Like the moment that you meet him, he has this like run-down, gross, sleazy feeling to him. And like you feel how bumbling he is in comparison to Gomez. Like there's the moment, it's like such a small choice, but after they finish talking about old business, Gomez jumps on the table, and Dan Hedaya decides to slowly and like really inefficiently crawl onto the desk just to show how like ineffective this character is. And I thought that was a really nice way of showing that without like being like, I suck.
Well, he plays it in such a way where, like, Dan Hedaya is one of those great actors who, like, you if you don't know his name, you definitely know his face. You've seen his work, and he's one of those actors that shows up in supporting parts and consistently elevates the material that he's working with. And in this movie, he's got this quality where, yeah, like he is sort of bumbling. He is way out of his element. He's definitely a sleaze, and he is actively conspiring against our protagonist. And yet at the same time, I at least almost couldn't help but feel genuinely bad for this guy who, even as he is scamming this family, is so absolutely out of his depth. I think he would have been a lot happier had he not, not gotten in bad with loan sharks, but two, if he had just tried to pay back the loans with his lawyer money instead of trying to run scams on the weird whimsical murder family and stuff. And I feel for him slightly, even though, yes, in the end, he deserves the comeuppance he receives, certainly. I think Dan Hedaya brings this sort of sad dog quality to the character. And it makes him a hair more, not sympathetic, certainly, but I think a hair more empathetic than he might have been otherwise, even as you sit there going, bro, don't do that to these people.
I mean, I don't know. Like, I feel like he got himself in that hole, literally and figuratively, because of his like shady dealings. Like, I have to imagine that this character has some kind of vice on the other side that we're not seeing, that he's like, oh man, look at all my bad lawyer stuff. He seems like a bad accountant, bad lawyer, like a bad husband. Like he just doesn't want to get his shit together. And even when the plan is falling apart, he's like, I have to find a way to do some more scheming. Like his first pitch to Gomez was that he's like, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to open an account, put it in my name, offshore, $1 million. Don't even worry about it. I'm going to take advantage of you. You're just an old dumb sap. And I don't like that. It sounds like that's what he does to all his clients. And that's why he has no other clients. It's just that, like, I assume that Gomez likes being taken advantage of. Like, I think that he's like, oh man, this guy's a garbage shark. And I like that about him. 'Cause you can see that spending money and doing like frivolous things with his cash it gets Gomez off. Like there's the scene in the auction where he and Morticia are basically bidding for their item. Right. And as they're bidding against each other for the thing that they put on auction, they're like, oh yeah, spend our money. This makes me so horny. So I imagine that like he loves the fact that this guy is trying to take advantage of him. Whereas everyone else, he tried this shit and they were like, hell no. Why would I do this thing? But Gomez is like, yeah, take my money. You're fucking worm. Ooh, I love it.
Look, I'm not saying he's a good person who has integrity. I'm just saying I feel like, maybe this is a man who is just stuck in very destructive behavioral patterns. And maybe if he'd found, a good therapist a handful of years ago, it's possible he would have made some different choices. And you gotta lament what may have been and was not for this guy.
Maybe.
I guess you don't have to, but you could.
So I want to talk about my favorite scene in this whole movie.
Okay.
Right before I talk about my least favorite stuff in this movie.
Okay.
But my favorite scene in this whole movie is when, so the whole time after we get Fester being introduced back to the family, we got these little scenes of the family being suspicious of Fester, but also trying to be supportive of Gomez, which I thought was really sweet. But also, I like that once we get to the point where everyone suspects him, Morticia is like, hey, why don't we take a walk, buddy? And she essentially takes him for a walk through the graveyard and is subtly threatening him the whole time. And it's so masterfully done in that she never raises her voice. She never even overtly is like, if you hurt my husband, I'm going to crush your balls in a vice. Like, she just goes through and talks about the hurt that has befallen everyone in their family. And then she takes him to the statue, which I like that it kind of looks like the original Gomez and Morticia, which I thought was a really cute little nod. But also, yes, she reads aloud the family motto, which is, I think it's something to the effect of, we will gladly eat the flesh of anyone who crosses us, or something like that. And it's like, cool, we're in agreement. Great. Enjoy your night. I thought that scene was so tense and beautiful, and both her and Christopher Lloyd played their parts so masterfully that it ended up being one of my favorite scenes in the whole thing.
Yeah. I could definitely see that.
Yeah. So, but now having said that, I'm going to talk about my least favorite bit in the whole movie, which I could have done without, which is,
let's hear it.
It's like the classic 90s, like it feels like an executive was like, we can't just have them hanging out in the house the whole time. And so we get the sequence where they're living in the hotel room, and it's like, look at the Addams family doing real people stuff. Look at them trying to do jobs. Ha 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 ha. Oh boy, what do you think Morticia would do if she was a teacher? Hee 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 hee. And I didn't like, and there was because like also in addition to being real 90s, it was also very there was a lot of product placement. Like, there's Lurch drinking in front of a Tombstone pizza billboard, and Gomez is eating Frito-Lay chips. And then Thing is doing package shipments for FedEx. Ooh boy, FedEx gets it to you fast. Yeah, look at that hand job. So I think that was my least favorite sequence in the movie, but I feel like it was worth it for the little banter we got with Wednesday and the Girl Scout, where the Girl Scout's like, I don't do anything that's not fresh and wholesome. Ooh boy, is your lemonade made out of lemons? And they're like, are your Girl Scout cookies made out of Girl Scouts? And I was like, damn! Served.
And that Girl Scout, I think it's the Girl Scout, is played by Mercedes McNabb, who I think a lot of people know as Harmony from Buffy and Angel.
Oh, cool. She also makes an appearance in the second one.
I'm seeing that. Presumably not as the main character, although I'm definitely watching the second one now that I've watched this one for the first time, and I'm going to track to see if there's anything in the movie that says they can't be the same character.
Right. I think they 100% are. I'm sure that there's a scene where she goes, "Real Girl Scouts my ass," and then just starts beating up. No. But yeah, but I will say that, like I mentioned at the top of the show, that I really like, even though I didn't like that sequence, I feel like in the second one, when we get the kids in, at the school, I liked that they kind of took what didn't work out of that sequence and managed to repurpose it for the summer camp stuff. Like, that was great.
Right. Yeah, and this movie came out in 91, I think. And so I feel like if it had come out even just a year and a half later, I think people would have already seen Wayne's World. And Wayne's World has that sequence where they're very explicitly making fun of obvious product placement in movies. And I feel like if this movie had come out right on the tail of that, it's possible that wouldn't have been able to fly. Because, yeah, it is in one or two spots very... It's pretty egregious. Also, speaking of Wayne's World, something that I learned that was a big nostalgia trip for me to learn this piece of information. Apparently, I want to say Wayne's World 2 and Addams Family Values, I think, were coming out at around the same time. And there was a tie-in promotional campaign with McDonald's in 93 where they would sell for like a low price exclusive VHS editions of the Addams Family and Wayne's World. So I gotta think, like, maybe there was a kid whose parents took him to McDonald's, got both of these movies for them because it's inexpensive. And it's like, hey, we can plop the kid down in front of the TV and they can do this for 4 hours or so. And they watch Wayne's World first, and they watch this sequence making fun of explicit product placement. And then they watch the Addams Family and go, hey, this movie's bad now, and just ruins the whole thing for them. So it's good that if they were going to do that, if they were going to build this sequence that way and put this very blatant product placement in, that they snuck this movie into theaters before Wayne's World, which, as we know, put an end to all product placement forever.
Right. Of course. Exactly. All right. So do you have any final thoughts about this before we start to wrap up?
I'm also a really big fan of the little scene where Wednesday sort of straps Pugsley into an electric chair for a good old game of Is There a God? That is yes. One of the, if not maybe the darkest joke in the movie, and I enjoyed it so much. Broadly speaking, this is, it's very dark, but it's a family film in the way we used to be able to refer to things as family films, which is to say there are jokes that are going to work on multiple levels. There are going to be jokes that are there for the kids, and a lot of times that's, sight gags or physical comedy, but there are also going to be jokes that go over the kids' heads that are there for the parents that are watching movies with their kids. I miss movies like that a great deal. Now, when we get movies that are directed towards younger audiences, they feel very directed at younger audiences, and there's not maybe quite as much there for an adult audience member. I think this movie strikes that balance really well. I think, and again, I think that's why Tim Burton, to some folks, might have been a no-brainer for this material, is because I think some of his work does that exceptionally well also. I feel like in terms of his oeuvre, the closest tonal approximation is probably the movie of his that I thought about the most while watching this, and it's Beetlejuice, which we talked about on this show a while back. I do think, though, it is interesting, given all of that about a decade after this movie, Tim Burton would adapt Dark Shadows as a feature, which, while not as well received, does feel in a way like him sort of taking a crack at an Addams Family type property, as far as, this was a sort of older series that people were familiar with. Now let's sort of update it for the modern age and play around in that sort of macabre yet whimsical space. Right. So I guess I'm glad that he got to take a crack at it, even though, yeah, that movie maybe not as beloved as The Addams Family, which is a movie that now, having seen it for real, quite possibly for the first time, I really enjoyed. So thank you for creating an opportunity for me to actually experience this thing in earnest.
You're welcome. Hey, anything I can do to help you enjoy stuff, anytime. No, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm glad that you were able to experience it for the first time. And yeah, I also think that, like, for me, this was a really nice chance to go back and enjoy a movie I haven't seen since I was really young. And now with my new understanding of law, how stuff works, and also just like how schemes work. I don't think when I was a kid I understood anything about the, like, why they were trying to break into the vault, or like that the lawyer was trying to scheme them. I was just like, look at this whimsical stuff. So like, I like that I understand the plot now, which is great.
I too prefer when I understand the plots of things.
Yeah. And I feel like this was a nice way to end the like Mother May I month. I feel like, so we started in a pretty serious place with Psycho, then we started moving into satire, which is kind of in between serious and comedic. Then we got to a nice comedic place, and then we went full lambast. So I think the progression really is a good reflection of us as people. We appear serious to start, and then you realize we're just a big bunch of cartoon buffoons.
I feel like it's sort of like the experience a lot of people are having right now in quarantine. Like, it all started very serious and scary, and gradually we're all just unraveling. And I think when we're finally all out of quarantine, we're all just going to be the most bizarre, alien, whimsical beings. I think there's going to be a lot of mamushkas danced, a lot of games of Is There a God played.
Oh no. So speaking of, we are now at the end of the Mother May I month. And so now we're going to be going into June, and we have decided that the theme is going to be School's Out Forever. And our theme is going to be focused on either summer-related content or school-related content, things of that sort. So that's going to be our theme. We are totally open to suggestions. Speaking of, loud and sorrowful apology to @Lisa McNabb, because she had suggested Cherry Falls, which we had announced last week, but it turns out that it's not available for streaming, I assume because of the troubled production that it had. And so we had to default back to our original pick, which was Addams Family. And so we still recommend that she keep suggesting stuff, and the same for you guys. Please feel free to reach out and let us know what you would want us to consume under the theme of the month. So this coming month's theme is School's Out Forever. And so you can...
I love when you do that.
Thank you. So you can recommend stuff on our Twitter, which is @MissingOutcast, MissingOutcast. So if you would like to suggest anything, you know, it can be movies, music, television, poetry, something that we can consume and discuss over the course of a week. Please feel free to reach out. You can also reach out to us on our personal social media. Lex, where can they find you?
I am on Twitter and Instagram @TheLexMichael.
Awesome. And you can find me @TariJ, TauriJay. Thank you again for listening. Thank you for enjoying this Mother May I month with us. We've had a lot of fun talking about mommy issues and seeing how the theme is portrayed over the course of basically the last 50, 60 years since we started with Psycho, and how a lot of the themes continue and how they are expressed in a lot of similar ways, which is a really fascinating thing to explore. So thank you guys for joining us for that. If you haven't had a chance to listen to the full series, you can do so. It's on all the platforms, Apple Podcast app, Google Podcast app, Stitcher, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. So yeah, until next week when we start our new theme, this has been the retrospective that is introspective.
And now you have a new perspective. The podcast of brotherly love. Mamushka.
Mamushka, 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 mamushka. Kiss some girls, do some stuff. Death, death, death.